What would have to happen for the one royal who never complains, never explains, and never breaks, to finally say, "Never show your face again"? Let that question sit for a second. Because this story is not about rage. It's not about tabloids. And it's definitely not about another palace tantrum. This is about something far more unsettling. The moment the most disciplined, most loyal, most emotionally controlled member of the royal family quietly reached her limit. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Princess, and has always been the constant. While others chased popularity, she chose duty. While scandals erupted, she stayed silent. While generations of royals struggled with relevance, she worked relentlessly, without applause, without complaint. So when whispers began to circulate that and had delivered a message so final, so unforgiving, that even senior royals were left stunned, people didn't want to believe it. Heartbroken, princessin, that word alone should make you uneasy. Because and doesn't break easily. And she certainly doesn't speak unless something irreversible has already happened. Here's what makes this moment different from every other royal fallout you've heard about. This wasn't triggered by an interview. It wasn't sparked by a book deal. It wasn't about Netflix cameras or public accusations. Those storms came and went. This was personal. And when something becomes personal for Anne, it means a line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Ask yourself this. What kind of betrayal is so profound that it silences diplomacy and replaces it with finality? Behind closed doors, and has long been known as the family's quiet enforcer. Not by shouting, not by scheming, but by remembering. Remembering who stood firm, and who didn't. Remembering who protected the institution when it was inconvenient, and who walked away when it became uncomfortable. Which is why her reported message to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. And it wasn't leaked for attention. It was devastating precisely because of how calm it was. Never come back. For words that don't scream anger. They whisper something far worse. Finality. And here's the part no one is asking loudly enough. Why now? Why would Anne, after years of holding the line, choose this moment to emotionally step away? Why would the woman who endured family turmoil for decades suddenly decide that reconciliation is no longer even on the table? The answer, according to those close to the situation, lies in a realization that hit her not as a headline, but as a truth. A truth that reframed everything she thought she was protecting. And once Anne saw it, she couldn't unsee it. Because when the royal who never speaks finally does, it means the damage is already done. And what broke her silence wasn't public betrayal. It was something far quieter, something far more cutting. And what came next would change the family forever, and no one saw it coming. The one royal who never breaks. Until now, if Princess Anne speaks, it means something has already gone terribly wrong. That's not an exaggeration. That's a rule inside royal circles. And is not reactive. She doesn't vent. She doesn't test emotions in public. She absorbs. She endures. She carries weight quietly, so others don't have to. Which is exactly why this moment landed like a thunderclap behind palace walls. For decades, and has been the unmovable spine of the monarchy. While others struggled with public opinion, she focused on duty. While scandals dominated headlines, she showed up to work. Reign, criticism, personal loss. It didn't matter. She kept going. That's why insiders often say, and doesn't take sides. She takes responsibility. So let's pause and ask something uncomfortable. If someone like Anne finally draws a line, is it because she's angry or because she's done believing? Here's the contradiction that makes this story so unsettling. Princess Anne has defended family members others quietly gave up on. She has tolerated embarrassment. She has swallowed resentment. She has even accepted being misunderstood because to her, preserving the institution mattered more than personal comfort. Until it didn't. Those close to and describe her as someone who measures loyalty the way others measure time. Slowly, precisely, and once spent, it does not regenerate. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And clarity, in this case, arrived quietly. Not during a media storm. Not during a public accusation. But during a moment so ordinary, so unguarded, that it reportedly shook her more than any interview ever could. Think about that. What kind of realization hits harder than global criticism? According to royal observers, and began to see a pattern she could no longer rationalize away. Not a single incident. Not one mistake. but repetition. Choices layered on top of choices. Each one eroding something she had spent a lifetime protecting. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for the audience too. And doesn't believe in emotional theatrics. She believes in consequences. She believes that once someone shows you who they are consistently, it's not your job to keep reinterpreting their actions more kindly. So when people say, "Why didn't she intervene earlier?" they miss the point. She did. Silently. Privately. Patiently. But patience has a breaking point when loyalty becomes one-sided. And here's the chilling part. When and reached that point, she didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't threaten. She stepped back. That alone sent shockwaves. Because when Princess and steps back, it means she has already made peace with losing something she once fought to keep. Ask yourself this. How bad does it have to get for the most steadfast royal to emotionally disengage? And that's when it reportedly happened. The moment and realized this wasn't a temporary rift. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't even a family dispute anymore. It was a fracture that could not be repaired without sacrificing everything she stood for. And once she saw that truth, there was no dramatic explosion, just a decision. But what happened next wasn't anger. It was far more devastating than that. Because according to those who witnessed it and didn't raise her voice at all, she delivered something much colder. And that message would change the family dynamic forever. Whether anyone was ready for it or not. The breaking point no one expected. It wasn't the interviews. Let that sink in. It wasn't the accusations, the documentaries, the books, or even the public jabs that made Princess and reach her limit. Those things were loud, predictable, almost expected in today's media climate. What broke her was something far quieter, something that never made headlines. And that's what makes this moment so disturbing. Because insiders say and didn't react in anger. She reacted in disbelief. Picture this. A woman who has spent her entire life compartmentalizing emotions suddenly realizes she has been doing something far more dangerous than tolerating chaos. She had been excusing it, explaining it away, telling herself that patience was strength, until one moment forced her to confront a question she could no longer avoid. What if loyalty is only flowing in one direction? That realization, according to royal observers, landed like a physical blow. Not dramatic, not explosive, heavy, final. The kind of realization that doesn't make you cry immediately, but rewrites how you understand the past. And reportedly became aware of a private exchange. Not a scandal, not a confrontation, just words. Ordinary words, delivered without malice, yet loaded with implication. Words that revealed an assumption and could not ignore. That the door would always remain open. That reconciliation was inevitable. That boundaries were optional. And that's when something inside her shifted. Because and doesn't see boundaries as punishment. She sees them as respect. And when someone repeatedly treats them as temporary obstacles instead of firm lines, it signals something far deeper than rebellion. It signals entitlement. Here's the contradiction that stunned those around her. And wasn't offended on behalf of the monarchy. She wasn't thinking about protocol. She wasn't even thinking about public image. She was thinking about trust. And once trust becomes conditional, it's already gone. People close to the situation say, and grew unusually quiet afterward. Not withdrawn. Focused. Observant. The way someone gets when they are no longer trying to fix something. Only understand whether it's worth saving. Ask yourself this. When someone stops arguing with you, is that a victory or a warning? Because and didn't challenge the assumption. She didn't correct it. She didn't push back. She let it stand. And in doing so, she allowed herself to finally accept something she had resisted for years. That reconciliation, in this case, wasn't healing. It was erasure. Erasure of standards. Erasure of accountability. Erasure of everything she believed family loyalty was supposed to mean. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about precedent. If certain lines can be crossed without consequence, what message does that send to everyone else who has sacrificed quietly? And that's when and made the decision that stunned even those closest to her. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of something far colder and far more irreversible. Acceptance. Acceptance that some bridges don't collapse in flames. They are simply walked away from. And according to sources, when and finally spoke after that moment, she didn't deliver a lecture. She delivered a conclusion. And those words, calm and measured, carried a weight no raised voice ever could. Because what she said next wasn't emotional. It was definitive. And when people realized what she meant by it, the room reportedly fell silent. Because they understood something terrifying. Princess and wasn't drawing a temporary boundary. She was closing the door. And what that door represented would become painfully clear next. Never come back. What that really means. Those 4 words didn't land like an insult. They landed like a verdict. Never come back. No shouting. No dramatics. No emotional display. Just a statement so calm that it took a moment for its meaning to fully sink in. And when it did, the effect was chilling. Because Princess and does not speak in exaggeration. When she says something, she means exactly what she says, and nothing more needs to be added. Here's what most people misunderstand about that phrase. It wasn't exile. It wasn't banishment. It wasn't even punishment. It was something far more unsettling. It was acceptance. Acceptance that the version of family and had spent decades protecting no longer existed. Acceptance that reconciliation, in this case, would require pretending nothing had changed, and refuses to live in fiction. Think about how rare that is. In families, people argue. They forgive. They reopen wounds and call it healing. They blur boundaries because it feels easier than standing firm, and has watched that cycle play out countless times, both privately and publicly. But she also understands something most people avoid. Forgiveness without accountability isn't peace. It's surrender, and does not surrender. So when she reportedly urged Harry and Meghan to never return, she wasn't reacting emotionally. She was drawing a moral conclusion, one rooted in consistency, not cruelty. The irony is impossible to ignore. The one royal who never sought power delivered the most powerful judgment of all, not through titles, not through protocol, but through emotional finality. Ask yourself this. Which hurts more, being yelled at, or being quietly let go? Because and didn't argue her case. She didn't defend her stance. She didn't need to. Her silence afterward said everything. Those close to the situation described the atmosphere as heavy. Not hostile, not chaotic, heavy with understanding. Because once and made that decision, it clarified everything else. There would be no more waiting for apologies that never arrive. No more holding space for repeated disappointment. No more bending principles in the name of family unity. And here's the part that unsettled even senior royals. And wasn't angry anymore. She was calm. And calm, in moments like this, is terrifying. Because it signals closure. Closure doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It simply ends the conversation. But just when it seemed that and had emotionally detached completely, something unexpected happened. Something that revealed this decision wasn't born from indifference, but from something far more painful. Grief. Grief for what the family once was. Grief for what it could have been. Grief for the effort she invested quietly, hoping it would be enough. And that grief led her to make one final choice. A choice not about exclusion, but protection. Protection of the institution. Protection of those who stayed. Protection of herself. And according to sources, that choice stunned everyone in the room. Because it showed that, and wasn't just closing a door. She was changing how the family would move forward from this point on. And what she chose to do next would echo far beyond this moment. Reshaping loyalties, redefining silence, and forcing everyone to confront a truth they had been avoiding for years. Because when Princess and lets go, she doesn't just walk away. She resets the future. And that future would be revealed in a way no one was prepared for. So let's come back to the question we opened with. What would have to happen for the one royal who never breaks to finally let go? The answer isn't anger. It's grief. Princess and didn't reach this moment because she stopped caring. She reached it because she cared for too long, in silence, while watching something she believed in slowly unravel. And when you understand that, her decision becomes even heavier. This wasn't about winning an argument. It wasn't about drawing lines in the sand for public approval. It was about recognizing that holding on was no longer an act of loyalty. It was an act of self-erasure. And refuses to erase herself. Think about how rare that is in families like this, where tradition demands endurance, where silence is mistaken for strength, where fixing things often means pretending the damage never happened, and saw the damage clearly. She saw that reconciliation, in this case, would require rewriting reality, smiling through unresolved fractures, lowering standards so no one feels uncomfortable, And she made a choice that very few people have the courage to make. She chose peace over performance. That's why her message carried so much weight. Never come back wasn't a threat. It was a boundary, a declaration that the cost of pretending had finally exceeded the cost of letting go. And here's the uncomfortable truth this story leaves us with. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who fight the longest. They're the ones who know when the fight itself has become the problem, and didn't slam the door. She closed it carefully, deliberately, with full awareness of what it meant. That's why those closest to her describe her not as bitter, but resolved. A woman who finally allowed herself to stop hoping for a version of the future that required her to compromise everything she believed in. Ask yourself this. How many times have you held space for someone who kept proving they wouldn't meet you there? How many times have you told yourself patience was virtue when it was really just exhaustion? Princess Anne's decision forces an uncomfortable reflection. That loyalty without reciprocity isn't noble. It's unsustainable. And silence, when stretched too far, doesn't protect relationships. It dissolves them. Her choice didn't end a chapter. It ended an illusion. And that may be the most shocking part of all. Because for years, people believed reconciliation was inevitable. That time would heal everything. That blood would outweigh behavior. And proved otherwise. She showed that dignity sometimes means walking away, even when the world expects you to stay. So the question now isn't whether her decision was harsh. The question is whether it was overdue, and whether others, watching quietly from the sidelines, are starting to realize the same thing. Because when the royal who never speaks finally does, she isn't rewriting history. She's telling the truth everyone else avoided. And that truth will continue to ripple through the family long after the noise fades. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. It was supposed to. Because sometimes the most powerful endings don't come with fireworks. They come with silence. And that silence says everything.